Well, I had promised Schoenberg that I would devote my life to music, which I loved. I love sounds.
Wait, I have a big fart coming in. Do you want to hear that?
John Cage was an American composer who was very interested in experimenting with music. Cage certainly was an interesting personality. For example, due to his interest at percussion instruments, he extended the sound world of piano by preparing it with pieces of wood, rubber, and screws in between the strings. This made the piano sound more like an exotic percussion instrument rather than a piano. This came after he had found an entire percussion instrument orchestra in Seattle in 1938. Cage's goal was to turn almost everything he could get his hands on into an instrument. It is safe to say that Cage was very interested in new and uncommon sources of sound. Also, many of his other works include various experimentations, such as the Suite for Toy Piano, played on the above-mentioned instrument, and Organ 2, As Slow as Possible, a classical piece of music composed with a duration of 639 years. The performance of the organ version at St. Bernhard's Church in Halberstadt, Germany, began in 2001 and is scheduled to end in 2640. Describing Cage's more traditional classical production is significantly easier for this sake. In most of his compositions, Cage focuses on the storytelling of the melody, creating a dreamlike world one could easily get lost in. Please take a listen to few samples from his production, Dream and In a Landscape. As you might have guessed, there are certain musical features common to Cage's music, which follow the same pattern, essential in forming the story. First of all come the wave-like dynamics, a crescendo of the rising melody, until it sings with the following diminuendo. The conjunct melody follows this set pattern, despite the limitations piano, Cage's favorite test subject, holds as an instrument. Speaking of the instrumentation, most of the time, only a single piano is responsible for the performance of his music. There aren't even more layers to be performed by more instruments. This renders the music monophonic or homophonic when the same piano plays two notes at the same time, which is a very rare instance, but these layers are very beautifully harmonized when they do occur. Many people may think, due to his anarchist nature, Cage did not give his songs any certain rhythmical pattern, nor did he define the tempo anywhere. However, this can also be explained by the message he was trying to convey us. Our dreams change and evolve, and so does the music which accompanies them. You might ask me, what makes this composition of music so different from Cage's production, as well as from the other musical world at the time? I encourage you to find it out yourself, as I'm now going to perform my version of 433. Please take a listen. There is no melody, or it's too diminuendo we can't hear it. There are no dynamics, neither is there tempo. There are layers, however. They are the music playing in the background. While we are at here, I might as well tell you a funny story which my father told me is related to this composition. He actually took the lead of the youth orchestra he was playing clarinet at and performed 433 with the title Emptiness. It shows how our attitude towards music like this has developed more open-minded over the years, as when my father performed this back in the 90s, he was almost kicked out of the music academy. "433" was a part of Cage's serious investigation on the properties of silence, which in turn sprang from his deep interest in Zen Buddhism.
I was struck by a story about Suzuki Daisetsu. He attended a conference of philosophers in Hawaii. And the first day after a lecture, when they all went out into the hall, another philosopher asked Suzuki what he thought of the lecture he had just heard. And Suzuki said, "It was a very good lecture, but the important thing in Zen is life." And the next day there was another lecture. And the same philosopher asked him after that one what he thought of it. And he said it was also very good. But the important thing in Zen is death. And the philosopher was surprised and said, "How can you say life one day and death the next?" And Suzuki said, "In Zen, there isn't much difference between the two."
After visiting a completely soundproof room and still hearing the sounds of his nervous system, Cage came to the conclusion that absolute silence without any kind of intrusive noise did not exist. According to his usual style, John Cage decided that this background noise should be considered music. During 433, he was asking the audience to listen to the ambient silence, the background noise, at any particular moment. Of course, the background noise was never the same, and also other performances nearby could influence it. As with all of his scores, Cage took the score of 433 to be stamped as his copyright. Returning the next day to collect it, he found that the administrator, having seen only a blank page, had innocently stamped it in the corner. Cage was furious. "You've put it on the music!" he shouted angrily. For the rest of his life, Cage continued to write provocative music requiring instruments such as water containers, decks of cards, birdsongs, radios with newsreader, and much else. 10 years after 433, he published a sequel called OO, described as a solo to be performed in any way by anyone. Cage himself performed it by eating a carrot with a contact microphone on his Adam's apple. In 2002, musician Mike Batt wrote a track called A Minute's Silence. Because of this, Cage's estate, the John Cage Trust, sued Batt for infringement of copyright. Batt countered by saying his silence was different from Cage's silence. Of course, he also argued that this was simply a better piece of music, as he delivered his message in a minute, in comparison to what took 4 minutes and 33 seconds from Cage to establish the same thing. Eventually, the case was settled between the parties outside of the court, as Batt paid the estate a 6-figure sum donation. A pricey minute's silence. Although John Cage himself has not been around for decades, his legacy still lives on. There is no question 433 made us think our apprehension of what exactly music was and is today. It is the art we perform daily, even though we wouldn't acknowledge it.